Chapter 1, The Invitation to Death. The heavy iron gates of Blackwood Manor creaked open as Evelyn Carter's car rolled up the long, winding driveway. The estate loomed ahead, a grand Victorian mansion shrouded in mist, its tall windows glowing like watchful eyes. Dressed in an elegant black evening gown, Evelyn adjusted the emerald pendant at her throat, the final touch to her disguise. To the world, she was Evelyn Sinclair, an heiress from New York with a taste for exclusive parties. In reality, she was here for one reason: to uncover the secrets of its enigmatic host, Reginald Blackwood. Billionaire, reclusive, and, according to her sources, a man who feared for his life. Stepping inside, Evelyn was greeted by a butler in crisp attire. Beyond him, a grand ballroom shimmered under chandeliers, laughter and soft jazz filling the air. Wealth dripped from every corner, women in diamonds, men in tailored suits, their smiles as polished as their reputations. But Evelyn knew better. Everyone here had something to hide. She spotted Blackwood near the fireplace, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and cold blue eyes. He was speaking in hushed tones with a nervous-looking gentleman. Before she could get closer, a booming voice cut through the chatter. "Ladies and gentlemen, a toast." Glasses were raised. Blackwood took his drink, lifting it high. "To secrets best left buried," he said with a smirk, then drank. Seconds later, he gasped. His glass slipped from his fingers, shattering. He clutched his throat, eyes wide with terror. And then, he collapsed. The room fell into chaos. Reginald Blackwood was dead. And the killer was still here. Chapter 2, The Game Begins. Screams echoed through the grand ballroom as guests recoiled in horror. A woman dropped her champagne flute, the glass shattered against the marble floor. A waiter stood frozen, the silver tray trembling in his hands. Evelyn Carter, however, didn't panic. She moved swiftly, kneeling beside Reginald Blackwood's lifeless body. His fingers were still curled in agony, his lips tinged blue. Poison. Fast-acting. Delivered through his drink. She glanced up. Eyes darted across the room, scanning expressions: shock, fear, calculation. Someone here had just committed murder. And they were watching. A sharp voice cut through the commotion. "Nobody leaves." It was Charles Whitmore, Blackwood's attorney. His face was pale but determined. "The estate is on lockdown," he continued. "The storm has cut off the roads, and the phones are down. Until the police arrive, we stay put." A murmur of unease spread through the room. Trapped with a murderer. Evelyn rose smoothly, brushing off her dress. She had to act fast, before the killer had a chance to cover their tracks. She caught Whitmore's eye. "We need to secure the crime scene." He hesitated. "And who exactly are you to give orders?" Evelyn smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "The only person in this room who knows how to catch a killer." Chapter 3, The First Suspect. A heavy silence settled over the ballroom. The storm outside howled against the tall windows, casting flickering shadows across the opulent decor. Charles Whitmore studied Evelyn, suspicion darkening his sharp features. "And why should we trust you?" Evelyn tilted her head, unfazed. "Because you don't have a choice. The killer is still in this room." A murmur spread through the guests. Eyes darted toward one another, doubt creeping in like a slow poison. Whitmore exhaled sharply. "Fine. We start questioning." He turned to the butler. "Lock the doors. No one leaves." The guests, now prisoners of the manor, shifted uneasily. Evelyn stepped forward. The poison was in Blackwood's drink. Someone had access to his glass before the toast. That narrows our list. She turned her gaze to a pale-faced man near the bar, William Harrington, Blackwood's business partner. His hand trembled around his untouched whiskey. "You were standing closest to him," Evelyn said. "And I saw you whispering to him before the toast." Harrington stiffened. "You think I? That's absurd." Evelyn arched a brow. "Then tell us, what were you discussing?" Harrington's Adam's apple bobbed. He was paranoid. Said he had proof that someone was trying to ruin him. He was going to reveal it tonight. A chill crept down Evelyn's spine. "Proof? Of what?" Harrington wiped his brow. "He didn't say who. Just that he had a file. And that if anything happened to him, we'd all know soon enough." Evelyn's mind raced. If Blackwood had evidence, then the killer wasn't just covering their tracks, they were desperate. Somewhere in this house, hidden among its secrets, was the key to the truth. And she intended to find it before the killer found her. Chapter 4, The Secret Room. The storm raged on outside as Evelyn made her way through the dimly lit corridors of Blackwood Manor. The grand estate, once a symbol of power and prestige, now felt like a gilded prison, one where a killer lurked in the shadows. If Blackwood had kept evidence, it had to be hidden somewhere. And Evelyn knew exactly where to start. She slipped away from the murmuring guests, her heels clicking softly against the polished wood floors. The house was massive, but she had studied the layout before arriving. There was one room that had always remained locked, the study. She reached the heavy mahogany door. Locked. Of course. Glancing over her shoulder to make sure she was alone, she pulled a slender hairpin from her updo. A few quick movements, a soft click, and the door creaked open. Stepping inside, she inhaled the scent of aged books and expensive cigars. The fireplace had been recently extinguished, and the room was in perfect order, too perfect. Someone had been here before her. She moved to the desk, running her fingers along the polished surface. No files. No notes. If Blackwood had kept proof, where was it? Then she noticed it, a single, misplaced book on the shelf. Evelyn pulled it. A mechanism clicked. The bookshelf slid open, revealing a narrow passageway. Her pulse quickened. Blackwood had a secret room. And someone had gone to great lengths to keep it hidden. Taking a steadying breath, she stepped inside. Chapter 5, A Message from the Dead. The air inside the secret room was stale, untouched by time. A single lamp flickered on a wooden desk, casting eerie shadows against the stone walls. Papers were scattered across the surface, letters, financial records, and a sealed envelope with Evelyn's name on it. Her breath caught. She tore it open, heart pounding. Inside was a single page, written in Blackwood's precise, hurried handwriting. Evelyn. If you're reading this, I'm already dead. Someone in this house wants me silenced. I have proof of their crimes, proof that could destroy them. But they won't stop at me. Be careful. Trust no one. Look for the key. RB. Evelyn clenched the letter. Look for the key? What key? She scanned the room. A safe stood against the far wall, its metal door shut tight. That had to be where he kept the real evidence. But without the key. A noise. Footsteps. Someone was outside. Evelyn extinguished the lamp, pressing herself into the shadows. The secret door creaked open, and a figure slipped inside. The glow of a flashlight swept over the desk, illuminating the face of William Harrington. His fingers trembled as he rifled through the papers, cursing under his breath. He was searching for something. Evelyn watched in silence. If she revealed herself now, he might panic, might lie. Instead, she waited. Observed. Harrington pulled open a drawer and let out a strangled gasp. He lifted a small golden key, his expression one of pure relief. The key Blackwood had warned about. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Whatever was inside that safe was worth killing for. She had to get to it, before he did. Chapter 6, Unlocking the Truth. Harrington clutched the golden key, his breath coming in short, nervous gasps. Evelyn remained perfectly still, watching as he turned toward the safe. His hands shook as he inserted the key into the lock. Click. The door creaked open, revealing a stack of documents, a small leather-bound notebook, and a flash drive. Harrington wasted no time. He reached for the notebook first, flipping through the pages with growing desperation. Then he swore under his breath. Evelyn stepped forward. Looking for something? Harrington spun around, his face draining of color. He fumbled with the notebook, attempting to tuck it into his jacket. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. Evelyn took a slow, deliberate step closer. "I could ask you the same thing." Her gaze flickered to the open safe. "Something in there worth killing for?" Harrington's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about." Evelyn sighed. "You're a terrible liar." She reached into her purse, retrieving a small, sleek pistol. She didn't point it at him, yet. Just enough to make a statement. "Put the notebook on the desk. Now." Harrington hesitated, but the look in Evelyn's eyes left no room for negotiation. Slowly, he obeyed. Evelyn picked it up, flipping through its yellowed pages. Her stomach clenched as she read. Names. Dates. Wire transfers. Bribes. Extortion. Blackmail. And at the very bottom, a list of people marked for elimination. Reginald Blackwood's name was already crossed out. And beneath it, Evelyn Carter. Her blood ran cold. She looked up at Harrington, who was now inching toward the door. "You knew," she said, her voice dangerously low. "You knew they were going to kill Blackwood." Harrington swallowed hard. "Listen, it's not what you think." A gunshot rang out. Harrington gasped. A crimson bloom spread across his chest as he stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock. Evelyn dove for cover, gun raised. The killer was here. And they weren't done yet. Chapter 7, the killer revealed. Harrington collapsed, his breath ragged as blood pooled beneath him. His lips moved, trying to form words, but then his body went still. Evelyn pressed herself against the wall, her own gun drawn, scanning the darkness. The shot had come from the doorway. Someone had been watching them. Someone who didn't want Harrington talking. A shadow moved. Then, a voice, calm, controlled. "Well, Miss Carter. It seems you're more persistent than I expected." Evelyn's grip on the pistol tightened. The figure stepped into the dim light, revealing Charles Whitmore. The attorney. The man who had insisted on locking down the estate. The man who had taken control the moment Blackwood was killed. Evelyn exhaled slowly. "You were behind this?" Whitmore chuckled, stepping over Harrington's body with a practiced ease, as if murder was nothing new to him. "Oh, come now. Did you really think Blackwood was innocent?" The man was drowning in secrets. His fortune was built on corruption, and he made enemies along the way. Evelyn kept her gun steady. "And you were one of them?" Whitmore smirked. "Not exactly. You see, I was his fixer. I cleaned up his messes. But then, the old fool decided to turn on his own associates. He gathered evidence, this very notebook you're holding, and thought he could bargain his way to redemption." He shook his head. "A fatal mistake." Evelyn's mind worked quickly. Whitmore had killed Blackwood to silence him. And now, with Harrington dead, she was the only loose end left. "I suppose this is the part where you kill me too?" she said, stalling for time. Whitmore smiled. "Nothing personal." He raised his gun. Evelyn fired first. A single shot. Whitmore staggered, a look of stunned disbelief on his face before he crumpled to the floor. Evelyn approached slowly, watching as his breaths became shallow. His fingers twitched toward his weapon, but she kicked it away. His lips parted, as if he wanted to say something, but then, he was gone. Silence filled the room, save for the raging storm outside. Evelyn exhaled, lowering her gun. It was over. Or so she thought. Because as she turned back to the safe, she noticed something chilling. The flash drive was missing. Someone else had been here. Someone still in the house. Chapter 8, the final twist. A cold dread settled in Evelyn's stomach. The flash drive was gone. She scanned the room, but there was no sign of another intruder. Someone had taken it in the chaos. Someone fast. Someone careful. Then she heard it, the soft creak of a floorboard outside the study. Evelyn spun toward the doorway, gun raised. But by the time she reached the hall, all she saw was a glimpse of a dark silhouette disappearing down the corridor. She bolted after them. The Manor's long hallways twisted like a labyrinth, the dim sconces casting airy shadows. Evelyn's pulse pounded in her ears as she chased the figure through the corridors, down the grand staircase, and into the ballroom. The guests had gathered again, whispering nervously. When they saw Evelyn storm in, breathless, gun in hand, the murmurs died. Someone in this room had the flash drive. Someone had been working with Whitmore, or against him. Evelyn's gaze swept across the faces. Panic. Suspicion. And then, she saw it. A flicker of something in the eyes of Isabelle Laurent, the French socialite draped in pearls and arrogance. Her gloved hand was clenched tightly around something in the folds of her silk gown. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice cold and sharp. "Drop it." Isabelle's lips curled into a smirk. But she didn't move. Evelyn took another step. "I said, drop it." The room was silent. All eyes were on them. Isabelle sighed dramatically, then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she let the flash drive slip from her fingers. It hit the polished floor with a quiet clank. "I was merely keeping it safe," she said, her voice smooth as velvet. Evelyn picked it up, studying the tiny device. This drive held the real truth, the one Blackwood died for. She looked back at Isabelle. "You knew what was on it?" A knowing smile. "Perhaps." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "You were working with Whitmore?" Isabelle laughed softly. "Oh, darling. I was working against him." Silence. The room seemed to shrink. Isabelle leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just for Evelyn. Blackwood wasn't the only one playing a dangerous game. You've only scratched the surface. There are bigger players. More powerful men. She tilted her head. You should be careful, Miss Carter. You wouldn't want to end up like him. Evelyn studied her, trying to read between the lines. Then, without another word, Isabel turned and walked toward the exit. The guests parted for her like the sea. Evelyn let her go. For now. Because as the storm outside finally began to clear, one thing was certain. This wasn't over.